Hey everyone, welcome back to the Veterinary Breakroom. I'm Dr. Alyssa Watson.
And I'm Dr. Beth Molleson.
And here in the break room, we have short conversations where we just kind of chat informally about things going on in veterinary medicine. And today we're going to be discussing something that is truly near and dear to my heart. And that is a recent survey study that was featured in the Journal of Human-Animal Interactions. And this study kind of examined the motivators, the challenges, job fulfillment, and burnout for mobile end-of-life practitioners such as myself. I think a lot of you know that for the past 4 years, I have been working in in-home end-of-life care, as part of a mobile practice. I do this 2 days a week. And, like I said, it's been a while now. Looking back, kind of just doing some quick calculations, I've probably performed at least 1,000 home euthanasias now. I know.
Wow.
I know it sounds like a lot, but truly, in 4 years of doing this. And so this I found this study really cool because it kind of let me reflect back over the last, few years of what I've been doing and what I've been able to do, with my DVM. So I sent it over to Dr. Beth. What did you think of the study?
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking about this topic. I've always been fascinated by the idea of doing this exclusively, what it would be like, what the experience is of those people doing it. I love that this group of people took the time to realize the importance of investigating this. And I would say most of my own hypotheses fit pretty well with, I would say, what they found. But I've always also been curious in your personal perspective, Alyssa, and sort of, I guess I want to first ask, what made you take this leap, or what made you think that it might be something you'd enjoy?
Yeah, so this was something that was not on my radar at all until like I said, I actually do work. It's not a corporate entity or setup. It's a private practitioner, but there are a group of 3 of us. And the doctor that started our practice, he actually had a brick and mortar practice here in town that I worked at for almost a decade. So we go way back. I worked for him, in a traditional general practice setting for years and years and years. And then he ended up selling that practice and starting Nevada Pet Hospice, which is the practice that I work with now part-time. And at the same time, I had already started working, for Clinicians Brief, which then, became part of Instinct Sciences. And so I was doing that remotely, and I had started to cut back on my clinic time. And then finally, I think a lot of the impetus was the pandemic. My kids were home from school. My husband is a teacher. He was teaching at home. The flexibility, which, by the way, certainly is one of the things that was really cited in the article about one of the real reasons people find a lot of satisfaction out of this, or that it's really helpful for them, is because you have so much autonomy and so much control over your own schedule, how many patients you'll see in a day, whether or not you want to, not see patients in the afternoon so that I can go, to something, my kid's soccer game or something like that. And the flexibility that offered, as well as the fact that I was going back to work with somebody that I truly loved working with and, and enjoyed, made me overcome kind of the hesitation, because I did have a lot of hesitation when he first approached me and, asked me to come on board with him as to whether or not that I could just do just euthanasia, like in and out all day. And so that's how I started.
Yeah. And would you say it met your expectations? Were there surprises? Were there things you wound up enjoying more about it? Things you hadn't even anticipated that you either liked or didn't like about it? How has it sort of stacked up to what you pictured?
I think that there were a lot of surprises. Yep. So there were a lot of surprises in the things that caused frustrations weren't exactly the things that I
Hmm.
thought were going to be frustrating for me. One of the things that I really had to get used to was kind of like not being married to my schedule. End of life
Mhm.
care is really unpredictable. Obviously, people, it's highly emotionally charged. People change their minds or have things, happen like that frequently. And so someone will make an appointment and an hour later they'll cancel that appointment. And an hour later they'll call back and want you to please come like now. And
Sure.
so yeah, and so getting used to that, you can't get married to your schedule, is one of the
Yeah.
things that I found. And for me, that can sometimes be frustrating, especially I was always that person in clinic where I like pulled up I between every room I pulled up the schedule and I was like planning. I was reading,
Sure.
their appointment notes and I'm like, "Oh, this is going to be a blocked cat or this is going to be, atopy," and planning out what I was going to do. And you can't do that in this job.
Yeah. Yeah. Understandable. And are you alone in this? I think, I have thought, I wouldn't say super seriously, but maybe semi seriously about considering it for myself in the past. I think the thing that has always kept me, or maybe the biggest barrier to me, has been the idea of working alone. I think for a few reasons. Like, I think I would maybe worry a little bit about my safety. And also, I mean, it's just scary to think you don't have anybody there. If I can't get a catheter in or can't lift the patient or whatever the case might be, the idea of being alone, how is that for you?
Yeah, so safety is a really huge concern. And I do think that it's sometimes something that I should be a little bit more aware of or in tune with. Sometimes I worry about it. I do carry like mace and bear spray. I know
Mhm.
some of my colleagues actually carry firearms. I'm not comfortable with that and I wouldn't know how to use it. And so I think it's probably more dangerous from that standpoint
Sure.
for me. So, but I do carry that. Again, my boss is very protective of us. Has absolutely said from the start, like, if you feel funny about a situation, just walk away, and that he is completely supportive of that. But yeah, you're going into somebody's homes. I am alone.
Mhm.
So I go completely, by myself. And it's, as I mentioned before, it's like highly emotional, highly charged situations. Luckily, in the last 4 years, I've never had a time where I felt, you know, particularly unsafe. I did have one appointment where I called to say I was on my way, and the person that answered the phone and was there was clearly intoxicated, and I
Mm.
didn't go.
Mhm.
I just said,
Mhm.
we're gonna, reschedule this.
Sure.
But safety is something. It was cited in the study as well. That some end of life practitioners had concerns about safety. Um, the other things, you had mentioned wondering if you could do this full time. And that was another thing that a lot of people mentioned, was that they don't do it full time, and neither do
Mhm.
I. And I don't know if I
Sure.
could. Like,
Yeah. Yep.
that there certainly are people that can, and I think that that's wonderful. For me, that's too much. I take on too much of, the family's grief, and 2 days a week is kind of a perfect balance for me. And I realize that I'm very lucky that I have other sources of income. That was another thing that a lot of these practitioners had cited as a frustration, or something that was, a challenge for them, were things like health insurance, as because a lot of these people are sole proprietors.
Sure.
It's just them.
Yep.
And so, yeah, so the business side of things, and
Yeah, and Alyssa, I'll
financial.
chime in
Yeah.
there too with the
Yeah.
I think the details of these results are pretty interesting as well. and we will link this survey or study in our show notes. It looks like they had a total of 162 vets that responded to the survey. You touched on some of these. 24% of people did cite lack of health benefits as the top concern, or I should say that was the top concern, with 24% of people citing it as a concern, followed by hassle of the business side, like you said, for 17% of people. And then I thought this was really interesting. When assessing burnout and professional fulfillment, a total of 14.8% indicated they felt burned out, and 69% of participant scores fell above the cutoff for professional fulfillment, suggesting that mobile end of life practitioners have a higher job fulfillment and lower burnout than for other veterinary professionals. So I thought that was sort of a fascinating takeaway. I'm not surprised by it, but again, I love that the time and effort and resources were put into sort of getting that information, because I think it leads us to another question or thought that we have had here on the podcast before is, how many times as vets have people come to us and said, oh, I don't know if I could do what you do, the euthanasias, or just that just
Right.
must be so hard. And again, I know we've talked about it here before. At least for me, that ranks nowhere near the top challenging piece of my job, and I think this study sort of seems to support that, which is nice.
If you've noticed your dog having difficulty moving, jumping, or playing, it could be a sign of osteoarthritis pain, or OA pain. OA pain is a chronic condition that impacts how your dog moves and feels. Do you think your dog is showing signs of OA pain? Know that treatment options are available. Ask your vet about what they can do to help control your dog's OA pain. Tap Learn More for details.
I agree with you. I definitely think it seems to support that. I would go even a step further though, and I think where the we need a little bit more research is, does, you know, performing end of life care in the home, where that is the only thing that you're focused on at that time, is that less stressful than performing euthanasia in the clinic for the practitioner? I know for me personally, it definitely is. And when I am in clinic, because I still am in clinic occasionally, I still relief at a few practices in town. And when I am in clinic and I have to do a euthanasia in the clinic setting, as weird as it is, with so many euthanasias under my belt, like I feel out of my element. Like I'm like,
Sure.
I don't have the same medications that I really like to have. I am a big proponent of, not having the animal out of the owner's sight, at any time during the euthanasia process. And so many of my practices remove the animal to put in an IV catheter and do those things. And I understand it. And it limits me because without the drugs that I normally use for my pre-euthanasia anesthesia, a lot of times I do need an IV catheter.
Yeah.
But even like the whole process when we're giving something like propofol, which sedates animals so fast, I find the experience for me is more rushed and more anxiety producing for me than when I'm at home in the clinic or when I'm in a client's home. And so like that was something that was very surprising to me to learn after years of doing it, is that once I was then back in the clinic, I was more uncomfortable. I wished that I was in the home setting.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I do think we so often focus on how nice, quote unquote, it is for pet owners to have this procedure done at home. But I think there's so much, like you said, to be said about what is this experience for, like for veterinarians in each of those settings. Because even though I don't think this is in the top 5 or 10 hardest parts of my job, that's not to say that euthanizing animals doesn't weigh on you heavily. And I think it's exasperated when, like you said, you're stepping out of that exam room into complete chaos where everyone needs you and is pulling you in a different direction. I think that could certainly impact the way that veterinarians process that, and that morale fatigue that that comes from euthanasias. What about what do you see from the pet owner side? I mean, I, of course, have my hypotheses, but do you see, I don't know, I'm curious about your insights on what the experience is like for people, sort of what that exchange looks like when they maybe experience in-home euthanasia for the first time.
Yeah, and a lot of my clients have this is their first experience with in-home euthanasia. Definitely over 50%. The When I'm going in, this is the first time that they've had in-home euthanasia. I would say almost every single one of them at the end say that they would never ever do this another way. And and I always give them the freedom to talk about other end of life experiences they've had, and I always also gently remind people, especially if they've had a distressing experience in the clinic or something like that, that sometimes there really is no choice, like that the
Sure.
suffering is, we're not able. In fact, I was that way with my own dog. When she passed, she was oxygen dependent, and I would have loved to bring her home, but that was
Yep.
not the right thing. That was not fair to her.
Yep.
And I know that the clinic staff at the emergency clinic that I was at did everything in their power to make that the most beautiful, peaceful experience they could, and so certainly
Sure.
not discounting that. We know that oftentimes the clinic is the right choice for that
Absolutely.
pet. But yeah, most of my families are very, very thankful. I get a lot of the same, believe it or not, the same phrasing that we do in the clinic. I would say 90% of the people when I go in and at some point during the appointment will say, gosh, I don't know how you do this, or this must be so hard, or like,
Yeah. Yep.
I think it's a natural thing to say,
Yeah.
and and sometimes it's hard, other end of life practitioners like myself, there's Facebook groups for end of life practitioners, just like there are for people who enjoy radiology or who specialize in, different aspects of veterinary medicine. And so I belong to those. I also have a couple good friends who, are end of life practitioners too. And we talk on a weekly basis. Also, something that was featured in the article I saw, they actually asked people, how much support they felt they got from their colleagues, and whether or not that factored into their fulfillment. And it truly does. And I would be lost without my dear colleagues and friends that are also end of life practitioners, because we definitely share some crazy stories.
Yeah, I'm sure. Say that's a good call out too, because you're right. There is, I feel like, some solace in when there's a euthanasia in the clinic, you've got the whole team that's in it together. But I imagine it could be a much more isolating experience to be alone with those pet owners and experiencing that with them. Yeah, it's a fascinating option to me. And I mean, how long has in-home euthanasia been a thing? I mean, I'm sure to some degree forever, but like, don't you feel like
Right.
it's taken off more in recent years
Oh
or
yeah.
decades?
Absolutely. I absolutely do feel that. And I probably should have looked that up before. It is, I mean, I used to do it. Like
Mhm.
I've been practicing, 22 years, I guess now. And when I first started practicing, I was at a mixed animal practice, and so we did farm calls all the time.
Sure.
And there were often times that we were called out to a ranch where we took care of the horses and things like that for, for a euthanasia of one of the companion animals, a dog or a cat. Definitely completely different than what I do now.
Yeah.
And yeah, completely different.
I'm sure. I can imagine. Well, I mean, I think euthanasia is such an interesting thing. Think it's such a unique aspect to our profession. I know it comes up a lot when we're talking about humans and end of life care in humans, and even just dealings with my own family members, and how it honestly being so deep within the veterinary profession and knowing that euthanasia is always an option. I don't think it was until I started spending more time looking into human health scenarios that I realized truly what a gift it is. I mean, I know it varies by state and country when we start talking about options for humans and end of life choices. But for some humans that simply don't have this option at the end of their life, and how devastating that can be, and how at least in my experience, so many times we let the suffering go on much longer in humans than we do in pets. I think it just really brings and sheds new light on what a unique experience it is that we as veterinarians get to partake in, whether in the clinic or at home.
Yep. You're definitely not alone in that, Beth. I would say that many of my families make that exact same comment on a weekly basis. And so it is something to think about. And, we're very lucky that we're in a situation where we are able to give the gift of a peaceful and dignified goodbye when it's necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know we see a lot of suffering, but then I think about our human counterparts in the human medical field who I have to imagine may sometimes see even much more profound suffering because euthanasia is often not an option. So anyway, Alyssa, this has been fun getting to talk to you about what I think is such an important topic. Like I said, we'll link this in our show notes so everyone can take a look. But I think that brings us to our win of the week.
Yeah.
Do you have any wins this week? Anything
to
brighten us up, Alyssa? Okay, good.
Oh, actually, yeah. I'm keeping it like on topic for my win of the week. Here is on topic for my win of the week. So because of what I do, I spend a lot of time in the car. I do a lot of driving and I spend a lot of time in the car. And while my job is incredibly fulfilling, I was getting stressed listening to the news. I cannot listen to the news anymore. And so instead, I found out that my library does participate in the Libby. There's this Libby app, and I can download audiobooks. And I did that at least a week or a week and a half ago. And I've already gone through 3 books because that's how much I drive.
That's amazing. You're a new woman.
I love it. I love my audiobooks. So that's my win of the week. How about you?
Oh, I love that. I am also a big Libby fan. My favorite is, I don't know if you've gotten into biographies, or I should say autobiographies, because I love hearing the, author or potentially famous person speak directly to me. I think that's a fun way to do it. Let's see. My one of the week, I'm going to make my one of the week. There's always so many things I'm happy about in the springtime because, I don't do well in the winter. So here in Ohio, we're finally getting warm weather. My win is going to be that our pool opens this week, and that may seem small to some, but for those of us with seasonal affective disorder, it is not small. I've made it through another Midwest winter, and that is worth celebrating. So that's going to be my win of the week. Is nice. Still somewhat moderate temperatures, but warm enough for the pool, and for that I'm thankful.
Yep, I love it. We're opening up our pool this weekend too, so very exciting.
I love it. I would have thought the pool season was longer in Vegas. Am I wrong?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would have had to heat. If we had a solar heater, then it would be fine. But gas prices have been high, so we haven't been heating the pool quite as much.
Use that free energy, solar energy source.
I mean, the kids will get in when it's, 72 degrees in the water, but I won't.
No, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and we hope to catch you next time in the break room. Thanks for joining us in the Veterinary Break Room. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including a video version on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review us. You can also listen to or watch our podcast episodes on our website at cliniciansbrief.com/podcasts. Or drop us a line at podcasts@instinct.vet. Veterinary Break Room is an Instinct Science production produced by Alexis Ussery and co-hosted by Alyssa Watson, Beth Molleson, and Katie Berlin.